Earlier, I was speaking to Mark Montgomery, who's a former US Navy Rear Admiral and now based at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. And I asked him whether he thought this latest attack by the Russians was a one-off in retaliation for the bombing of the Kerch Bridge.
I do think it is a response. I'm not sure it's going to be a one-off, but it is probably what Putin measures as a proportionate response to the attack in Crimea. And I think your previous interviewee was exactly right. This is as much about fear as it is about striking critical infrastructure. I would not be surprised if there's follow-on strikes on this, but I do think it's Putin's version of a proportionate response to the attack on the bridge in Crimea.
Right, that's quite interesting. I think President Macron of France has described it in words of suggesting it's a sort of fundamental shift in the way this conflict is going.
Well, it is in the sense that, in the past, Russian cruise missiles have hit critical infrastructure. They've hit civilian areas as collateral damage. And I think as much because of their poor performance of their cruise and ballistic missiles, I think this was much more a concerted, deliberate attack to cause fear and weaken resilience in Ukraine. Now, obviously, it's very late in the procedure here, 10 months in, to begin to try to think about breaking the resilience of the Ukrainian people. But I do think it's escalatory. I agree with President Macron, but I think Putin believes it's a proportionate response.
I said in introducing you, Mark, that you are nuclear trained. I mean, our viewers are going to think, well, there's a reason for talking to Mark Montgomery in that case. I mean, there are steps that can be taken, many steps presumably, which are certainly for civilians like today pretty terrifying, but they seem to be, as you put it, escalatory before we have to start talking once again, presumably, about that nuclear option.
I think you're right. There's going to be significantly more attacks on critical infrastructure before that. In addition, a kind of twist on the nuclear option is the idea of attacks on the critical infrastructure around Zaporizhzhia again, and the idea of potentially causing a radioactive incident, which would be, equally challenging and deadly for locals in the area, and have long-term impacts on the health and safety of the Ukrainian cities in the region.
I'm presuming, I understand we're going to hear from President Zelensky. He'll be addressing this G7 virtual summit on Tuesday and inevitably calling once again for more support, more military support as well. Given all that's happened in the last 48 hours or so, it would be extraordinary not to hear further voices of absolute support at this stage for Ukraine.
I agree, and I think we'll see very explicitly. So the U.S. has promised 8 National Advanced Surface Air Missile Systems. Those called NASAMS. 2 of them should be delivered by the end of November. I don't know how accelerated that can occur because there's quite a bit of training that's going on right now as we speak. Slight accelerations on that. Maybe it gets here in early or mid-November, and that'll be 2 systems that you could put in Kiev. The other 6 systems are months to not half a year away. So there's going to be a push, for how do we get, air defense capable systems there. And I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that. But I do believe the United States and its European partners have to continue this persistent drumbeat of $1 billion to $1.5 billion every 2 to 3 weeks of military assistance.
Yeah, that's Mark Montgomery, a former US Navy Rear Admiral, talking to me earlier.